Hey geeks and gamers, and welcome back to my channel. In the current time, it's really rough to build a gaming PC with ongoing GPU shortage. You have some options, but not many. Pay a scalper's price? Nah, we don't want to do that. Perhaps buy a pre-built, but you often get components and stuff that you don't want. But there is one other option. Get a Barebone that includes the GPU you want. Today we're going to take a look at one, and I hope it will be awesome. Let's find out. Roll the intro. Okay, my requirements to the Barebone were a small case and at least a 3070. Did I find something? Yes. Let's take a look. Here it is. The name is really long. Zotac Magnus 1 ECM 730. It's 3070C. Barebone. What's inside? Let's take a look. The specs are on the box. Let me quickly read that. I have to take off my glasses. The Zotac Magnus 1 Barebone features an i7-10700 with 8 cores and 16 threads, being able to turbo up to 4.8 GHz on single cores or 4.6 GHz all core. The mainboard supports up to 64 GB of DDR4 RAM, although it requires SODIMM RAM modules. But most importantly, the Barebone comes with a Zotac RTX 3070 graphics card pre-installed. Storage-wise, we can add one 2.5-inch SATA HDD or SSD and up to two M.2 PCIe drives. The Magnus 1 also has tons of I/O connectivity, a microphone-headphone combo jack, and something I really like, a full-size SD card reader supporting high-speed cards. Furthermore, it features 4 USB 3.1 ports and 4 USB 3.0 ports, including one Type-C port. The Barebone also has dual Ethernet ports, 1 gigabit port and one 2.5 gigabit port. Furthermore, it supports Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5. The included power supply is a 500 watt 18 plus platinum rated small form factor PSU. As you can see, with regard to size, the Magnus 1 is really small. The total volume of the case is only around 8.3 liters. But what about the price? For the Barebone system described here, I paid 1,500 euros. Is the Magnus 1 worth the price? Let us open it up, take a look inside, add RAM and drives, and benchmark the whole system. Let's go! Yeah. What do we need to add? RAM, drives, and that's it. And it's a tiny case. We'll take a look at the inside now. Okay, let's do it. Okay, I made some space on the table. Let's open it up. Oh no. It's taped shut. Okay, let me get a knife. One moment. Okay, I'm back. And here we go. Bam. All right. Let's see how big it is. It should be below 10 liters. I'm really excited about this. It smells good. Opening up stuff that's brand new. Oh, it's tiny. Take a look at this. Oh, it's heavy. Okay, inside the box is another box. Okay, what's inside this box? Let's quickly check that out before we get to the good stuff. Manuals. Yay. Wi-Fi antennas. So it got included Wi-Fi. Nice. Put them to the side. A power cord for US, UK. Okay, useless. Here we go. The right power cord. And that's it. Yeah, the Barebone includes a PSU. It's all already in there, including a 3070. I'm really excited how that fits in there. Let's take away the packaging stuff, put that away, and oh, it's tiny. Which side is up? Which side is down? I guess it's like this. Okay, here it is in all its beauty. It's really small and super heavy. I hope you can see it. This is the front, and like the sides, they look the same. VIO, tons of. We'll take a closer look in a moment, but we still need to install RAM and drives. Let's take a look inside. How hard is it to get inside? Should be those thumb screws that I can turn with my thumbs. I need a screwdriver. Screw it. Okay, one moment. Okay, small Phillips head screwdriver did the trick. And now they come off easily, but they were tightened far too fast. God damn it. Okay, now we can just push back on the upper part. That's what they say in the manual. Oh, push down and move over to the side. And it comes off. Nice. Now the side panels go up. Let's start with this one. Nice. And the second one, oh, that's easy. Only those thumb screws were a bit annoying. Okay, let's take a closer look at the inside. Okay, let us add RAM and drives to the mainboard. As you can see, the system is split. When you remove the side panels, you have the motherboard on one side and the graphics card on the other side. The motherboard is really small and the connection to the graphics card is established via a daughter board at the bottom of the case. It is kinda similar to Intel's Extreme NUCs and the compute modules, although this Barebone is far more user maintainable and upgradable. Here at the top we have the two SODIMM slots. Let us quickly open them up and add some RAM. I went with a crucial 3200 MHz 32 GB set. Click them in there and make sure they fit nice and snug. Now for the storage. For the operating system and programs, I wanted something super fast to start from. So I went with a Corsair MP510 NVMe 400 GB drive. The installation is super simple. You have the M2 slots here in the top right portion of the motherboard, including the slot for the Wi-Fi/Bluetooth module. To install the M2 drive, I removed the cage for the SATA drive, which was only held in place by a thumb screw. And yes, the screw and the standoff for the M2 slot are really one part. I tried everything to separate them, till I noticed that. It's a bit weird, but it works. Funny enough, the Wi-Fi module has a normal standoff plus a tiny screw to hold it in place, as you would expect. Now for the SATA drive. As mentioned earlier, I removed this plastic cage to install the M2 drive. The SATA drive just slides in there and you then plug it directly to the mainboard. No cables required. Okay, small correction. The port is actually on the daughter board. Let us quickly clip the drive into that plastic holder and plug it in. Now all you need to do is tighten the thumb screw and you're ready to go. Next up, let us take a look at the rear of the system. At the top you have the 3070 with one HDMI port and 3 display ports. At the bottom you have the mainboard with its I/O, including 6 USB ports, a HDMI port for the integrated Intel graphics, and the 2 Ethernet ports. The one with a grey square around it is the 2.5 gigabit one. On the right side we have the small form factor 500 watt PSU. That's it. Okay, let's take a look at the front of the PC. Here we have the full-size SD card reader, a USB Type-C port and the USB Type-A port, and of course the audio port. So far so good. Now let's take a look at the site where the graphics card is located. I'm sorry, it seems my camera didn't focus properly, but it's basically a short version of a 3070 featuring only 2 fans. At the bottom you can see that the card is just plugged into the daughter board. It's a normal PCI Express graphics card that you could easily remove or add to another system or replace. Alright, time to put the case back together. This is as easy as pulling it apart. Just snap the side panels back on and then slide the top cover back in place. Nice. The top also includes 2 fans for ventilation. The good news about the tiny case is that the GPU and CPU are separated from each other and placed on different sides of the case. So the GPU and CPU both pull in fresh air from its own side, while the top cover fans pull out the hot air from the system. It is a quite clever cooling solution for such a small case. Benchmark time. Let us put the system through its paces. We will always aim for the highest preset in each game, sometimes turning RTX on and off for a comparison. The first game is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. An average of 80 FPS at the ultra high preset is pretty darn good, but I never figured out why this benchmark has a drop down in frames at the same spot no matter the system. This dip down in the benchmark, in this case to 40 FPS, has never really happened to me in-game, or at least occurred to me. The game runs butterly smooth and is no real challenge to the system. Next up we have F1 2020. This game is awesome for testing even low-spec systems, so it is no threat for this machine. At the ultra-high preset we have a minimum of 187 FPS and a maximum of 276 FPS. The average FPS number is 227. This machine can run this game all day long, no sweat. Next up is Far Cry New Dawn at the ultra preset. I might have even activated HDR by accident, whatever. The Magnus One chews through this benchmark at an average of 104 FPS with a minimum of 72 FPS and a whooping maximum of 162 FPS. Easy. And welcome to Hitman 3. This title has a lot of stuff going on with all the NPCs moving around and high particle density, at least in the Dartmoor benchmark. I turned all settings for the benchmark to ultra, like level of detail, shadow quality, etc., or too high if that was the best option available. So, in the Dartmoor benchmark, we end up with a whooping 111 FPS average. Moving on to the Dubai benchmark in Hitman 3. With less explosions and particles, it is definitely less demanding, and we end up with a 193 FPS average. Amazing. Let's move on to a more demanding title, Red Dead Redemption 2. Unfortunately, this game has tons of options to tweak, and I am always lazy with this one. So I leave the quality slider in the center, a kind of balanced preset, and let the game decide on the settings. All I make sure of is that the Vulkan engine is selected. With that out of the way, we never dip below 65 FPS as a minimum and even reach a maximum of almost 150 FPS at times. The average is an impressive 104 FPS. This PC has no issues running this game to its full extent. Time for an older but still demanding title, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. With the highest preset, but ray tracing disabled, we end up with an average of 142 FPS. This title runs so butterly smooth on this machine. So let's turn on ray tracing. Okay, with the ray tracing enabled and set to ultra quality for the ray trace shadows, we dip down to a still impressive 100 FPS average. Honestly, it might be hard to spot sometimes, but there are a lot of scenes where the ray trace shadows are so much nicer. So it is good to know that you can crank up all the settings to the max in Shadow of the Tomb Raider without any major FPS drops, staying well above the magic 60 FPS number. Next up is the Division 2. With the highest available preset and VSync disabled, we end up with 124 FPS average. As you can see in the utilization, the CPU is quite bored most of the time, while we are hitting a healthy 93% GPU utilization. This machine is really quite nicely balanced with regard to its components. Not much to see here, so let's move on. Okay, time for a more recent title, Watch Dogs Legion. With the Ultra preset but RTX disabled, we end up with an average of 83 FPS and a 1% low of 65 FPS. This is impressive and totally fine. But what happens if we turn on RTX for the maximum fun, but also turn on DLSS? So let's see. Of course, the FPS numbers drop significantly. Ray tracing looks amazing in this game, really, so it's worth it. A lot of people would say that DLSS is bad, but honestly, with DLSS 2.0 and higher, I see no reason not to turn it on with the DLSS preset set to quality. I could not spot any visual distortions, problems or artifacts, no matter how hard I tried or how many times I ran the benchmark. With an average of 65 FPS and 52 FPS 1% low, this title is perfectly playable on this machine with everything cranked up to the maximum. Next up is Wolfenstein Youngblood, another title that supports ray tracing and DLSS. So I went the lazy route. I cranked the settings up to the highest possible option, Mein Leben, and enabled RTX and DLSS. In LabX, we end up with an average of 199 FPS. Holy moly, this is impressive. Let that sink in. This is amazing. Moving on to Riverside. Okay, and even here we average out on 135 FPS. The minimum is 91, so no dip downs, no problems, nothing. This game runs so smooth and amazingly fast. It's cool. Okay, next up is Metro Exodus. I'm not the biggest fan of the benchmark as it tends to be much harder to run than the actual game. I chose the Ultra preset first with the ray tracing disabled. Here we end up with an average of 93 FPS, but also had a dip down in between to around 45 FPS. But honestly, the game itself will run superb on this machine. But what if we enable ray tracing? The RTX preset matches the Ultra preset from before, but with, you might guess it, ray tracing enabled. Here we end up with a still impressive 81 FPS on average and a minimum frame rate dip down to 42 FPS. Still super impressive numbers. I would have no problems running this game at those settings and enjoying it to its full extent. Last but not least, Cyberpunk 2077. It is not a competitive shooter, and with those story-driven action adventures, image quality is more important to me than super high FPS numbers. Unfortunately, the game does not have a built-in benchmark. I cranked up everything to Ultra and chose that Ultra Ray Tracing preset or whatever that was called with DLSS enabled. In the scene shown, I have 70 FPS looking down there. This is straight at the beginning of the game, so it is super easy for you to get there, take the same position as shown, and compare your FPS numbers. In that area I had around 70 FPS all the time, with some dips down to 60. So this is totally fine. Okay, before we come to a conclusion and I'll tell you my opinion about the Magnus 1 Barebone, let's talk about power consumption. Idle, the machine draws around 50 to 55 watts off the wall. When you push the CPU to 100%, but just the CPU, not the GPU, the power consumption goes up to around 230 watts. And finally, like heavy gaming, the power consumption went up to around 330 watts. So you see the 500 watt small form factor PSU in that machine is totally fine. It's perfect. Okay, conclusion time. That Barebone is really impressive. 8.3 liters case, and anything I threw at it, it handled it perfectly fine. All the games, all the workloads, whatever. Price-wise, $1,500 may not sound super cheap, but don't forget what you get. You get a super small RTX case, including the motherboard, CPU, And of course, most importantly, a 3070 GPU. Also included is a kind of like a riser cable. I mean, it's in this case it's a daughter board, but still you would need to buy that. You get all the fans, the PSU, and all that stuff in one small package, pre-built for you. You just have to add the RAM and the drives. In my case, that adds up around 340 bucks. So we end up in a total of 1,840 euros. It's not too bad. So what if you're on a budget? Are there alternatives? Yes, and there's even one from Zotac, another one, the Zotac Magnus 1, same case, but smaller graphics card and 10th gen Intel CPU with just 6 cores. It's an i5, 6 cores, 12 threads, and the GPU is just a 3060, but it only costs around 1,200 bucks. Not too bad. Another alternative would of course be the Intel Extreme NUC PCs, the ones where you also have a separated GPU and on the other side a compute module, but they are less upgradable and maintainable in my opinion. They run hot and they are super expensive. I wouldn't buy them. They are not smaller, they are just more expensive. Do I have something negative to say about the Zotac One? Perhaps. It's a bit loud. The cooling solution is mainly the two fans on the top and the CPU cooler that pulls in air from one side, and the two fans for the GPU on the other side. They spin up pretty fast and you get a certain noise level that you don't get under it while gaming. That can be annoying to someone, but I'm wearing a headset, so I don't care. What else is left to say? Not much. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a lot of work, so don't forget to like and subscribe. And I hope to see you next time when we will check out the 5700G from AMD. The CPU, 8 cores, 16 threads with the integrated APU, the most powerful one at the moment. So subscribe so you don't miss out on that. See you soon, stay safe, Alpha, over and out.